Staying in bed in the morning is all.
Staying in bed in the morning, wrapped in a cocoon of blankets, is all I have ever asked of life. That quiet, ordinary desire stands in stark contrast to the world that awaited Virginia Mayo, a world that would demand everything from her: energy, beauty, resilience, and a toughness she hadn't even realized she possessed. In 1941, Warner Brothers filmed a 12-minute screen test of Virginia, a test meant to measure her potential as a Hollywood star. But none of it made the final cut. The footage, hidden and forgotten, disappeared into the studio vaults, locked away for over 8 decades. It was as if Hollywood itself had decided that the raw, unpolished version of Virginia Mayo was too dangerous, too real, too unsanitized for public consumption. It wasn't until 2023 that this treasure re-emerged, restored by meticulous film historians. They screened it privately in Los Angeles, and those who watched it were stunned. What appeared before them wasn't the poised, polished star the world had come to adore. It was raw, it was unfiltered, and it was Virginia Mayo before the relentless, controlling hand of the studio system began shaping her image. For 12 minutes, audiences were given a glimpse of a woman who was entirely herself, playful, daring, magnetic, and defiantly in control of her presence. Those 12 minutes, once buried, now told a story Hollywood had tried to erase, a story of authenticity, of talent unbound by convention, and of a star who was meant to shine on her own terms. The studio had buried the footage for a reason. What Virginia did during those minutes wasn't just auditioning for a role, it was a silent rebellion. It was proof that before she became a screen icon, before the world knew her as the glamorous, controlled face of Warner Brothers, she had fire in her, and the courage to risk everything to show it. And that fire, though hidden for decades, would eventually blaze through, reshaping her career and leaving a legacy that was as much about her spirit as her talent. Virginia Mayo was born Virginia Clara Jones on November 30, 1920, in a cramped 2-room apartment above a smoky saloon in St. Louis, Missouri. The building smelled of whiskey and sawdust, a scent that would linger in her memory for years. Her family's roots stretched deep into American history, all the way back to 1797, when her ancestor, Captain James Piggott, founded East St. Louis. But heritage meant little when daily survival became a struggle. Her father, Luke Jones, had once been a reporter for the St. Louis Globe-Democrat, a man who knew the power of words and the influence of stories, but after World War I, the economy had swallowed his employment. The slump that followed forced the family into constant uncertainty, sometimes moving in with relatives just to make ends meet. The Joneses were a family of grit and perseverance, but the world around them offered little comfort. Even amid hardship, Virginia's childhood wasn't devoid of beauty and creativity. Her aunt ran a local acting school, and it was there that Virginia first found herself drawn into the world of performance. By the age of 6, she was already mimicking her mother's gestures and routines, dancing around the small apartment as if the tiny space were a grand stage. She took elocution lessons, dance classes, and began performing at small-town events, often in front of a few neighbors or local enthusiasts. These early experiences, a blend of hardship and creativity, would become the foundation of her lifelong tenacity. Virginia learned quickly that to survive in the world she dreamed of, she would need more than talent, she would need courage, determination, and an unyielding work ethic. Life in St. Louis was tough, but it was formative. The crowded apartment, the echo of saloon music from below, the constant threat of economic collapse, these shaped her resilience. Her parents' struggles taught her early lessons about endurance, about making do with little, and about striving even when the odds were stacked against her. And yet, there was always room for imagination, for play, for the first sparks of the performer she would one day become. Those tiny stages, those borrowed moments in dance halls and small theaters, offered glimpses of a world beyond survival, a world where she could create, express, and eventually captivate audiences far larger than the cramped rooms she had grown up in. Virginia's early life was a delicate balance between constraint and possibility, between poverty and promise. Every small act of performance was a declaration of self, a subtle rebellion against the limitations imposed by her circumstances. In those formative years, she began to cultivate the courage and artistry that would carry her through the grueling path to Hollywood, long before anyone outside St. Louis had ever heard her name. By the age of 16, Virginia Mayo was ready to step into the world on her own terms. She graduated from Seldan High School in 1937, leaving behind the familiar streets of St. Louis for the uncertain world of performance. Her first real taste of professional life came at the St. Louis Municipal Opera Theater, where she joined the chorus line for a modest $15 a week. The pay was small, barely enough to cover the cost of boarding houses and basic living, but for Virginia, it represented independence, a ticket into the life she had been dreaming of since childhood. She danced alongside 6 other young performers at the Hotel Jefferson, executing routines that demanded precision and stamina. It was grueling work, and Virginia often found herself sewing her own costumes from scraps of fabric, determined to meet the visual standards of the show. Yet, it was in these crowded, chaotic rehearsal rooms that she began to hone the craft that would later define her career. Every pirouette, every carefully timed gesture, every interaction with the audience became practice, not just in technique, but in presence and resilience. It was during this period that Virginia caught the eye of Andy Mayo, a performer who saw something extraordinary in the young girl tirelessly dancing and performing under the dim lights of the local theaters. He invited her to join a vaudeville act called Morton and Mayo. For the next 3 years, Virginia became the comedic counterpoint to their pantomime horse act, drawing laughter from audiences while establishing herself as the heart of the routine. Their act eventually reached New York, landing at Billy Rose's Diamond Horseshoe Club, one of the city's most prominent venues. Here, for the first time, Hollywood's gaze fell upon her. Samuel Goldwyn, known for spotting new talent, noticed Virginia's presence, although the world had yet to understand what he had seen. Life on the vaudeville circuit was far from glamorous. Virginia often faced grueling hours, harsh living conditions, and the ever-present threat of harassment from stage managers who saw young girls like her as expendable. Despite these challenges, she remained undeterred. She practiced relentlessly, learning early that survival in the entertainment world required grit as much as talent. She pushed through exhaustion, financial strain, and the occasional humiliation with a focus that bordered on obsession. Every small success, every laugh from the audience, became a stepping stone towards something larger, something beyond the cramped stages of St. Louis, a future in which Virginia Mayo would command attention not because she was polished, but because she refused to be ignored. At 16, Virginia's determination carried her into even more daring arenas. She joined the Aquacade, a traveling water show that transformed public pools into glittering stages, a spectacle of synchronized swimming, diving, and dazzling choreography. For Virginia, it was a world unlike any she had known, a place where precision met danger, and every performance tested both skill and courage. Day after day, she dove, danced, and glided alongside other performers, her movements graceful yet demanding, each routine a delicate balance between artistry and risk. It was during one particularly complicated routine in Chicago that Virginia faced a moment that could have ended everything. She lost her footing mid-dive, plunging into the pool and emerging unconscious, pulled from the water by frantic colleagues. The incident made local headlines, a cautionary tale of the risks young performers faced. But Virginia Mayo was never one to yield in the face of adversity. Once she recovered, she confronted the producers with an audacity that belied her age. She demanded a raise, reasoning that the danger of the performance warranted higher pay. Her request, though bold, succeeded. Her weekly earnings jumped from $25 to $35, marking her first negotiation and the earliest glimpse of her tenacity, a woman who understood her value and wasn't afraid to claim it. 2 years later, in 1939, Virginia reached Broadway, joining the prestigious George White's Scandals as an understudy. Though she was not yet in the spotlight, she drew attention with her energy and presence. However, the harsh realities of show business were never far behind. During a live rehearsal, a wardrobe malfunction left her exposed and humiliated, whispers circulating backstage and gossip columns seizing on the incident. It was a painful lesson in the power of image, the fragility of reputation, and the scrutiny young women faced in an industry dominated by men. Rather than retreat, Virginia internalized the lesson: talent alone was not enough. Survival demanded resilience, strategy, and an unyielding will to persevere. Even in these early years, Virginia's spirit was unbreakable. She skipped school to rehearse ballet alone, practiced tirelessly, and faced every setback with a mixture of courage and cunning. Her experiences in vaudeville and the aquacade forged a foundation of endurance and audacity, shaping the woman who would eventually stand before Hollywood, ready to claim her place. Every near fall, every humiliation, every daring dive was not merely a step in her career, it was a rehearsal for life, a trial by water, applause, and adversity that would prepare her for the unforgiving world of the silver screen. In 1940, Virginia Mayo arrived in New York, a city teeming with opportunity yet merciless to the unprepared. She had left behind St. Louis with little more than determination and a few dollars in her pocket, ready to chase a dream that seemed both tangible and elusive. Early in her New York journey, she fell for a small-time producer who promised her a screen test, a potential gateway to Hollywood. The night of hope quickly turned into despair. The man disappeared, leaving Virginia alone in a city that didn't notice her struggle. For 2 nights, she slept on cold benches in Central Park, the chill of November biting at her skin, hunger gnawing at her stomach. The city's indifferent lights reflected the harsh reality she faced. Ambition alone could not shield her from life's cruelty. Survival meant humility and perseverance. Virginia found a job at a diner near Times Square, pouring coffee and serving sandwiches, a far cry from the glamour she had envisioned. Yet, even amid this hardship, her resolve never wavered. Each day she worked, she reminded herself that her journey was not measured by comfort but by endurance and opportunity. It was in this crucible of adversity that her character hardened, preparing her for the battles she would face once Hollywood finally noticed her. Her breakthrough came unexpectedly in a cramped Manhattan office. She auditioned for Samuel Goldwyn's team, a meeting that would change her life forever. Trembling with nerves, she delivered a scene from Gone with the Wind. Her voice wavered, her hands shook, yet beneath the surface, something undeniable shone through, a spark, a presence, an unrefined star power that could not be ignored. Goldwyn and his team saw what others had overlooked, raw talent coupled with resilience, a woman who could endure both the physical and emotional demands of the film industry. They offered her a contract worth $1,500 for a year, a modest sum but a monumental step toward her dream. There were strings attached, strict clauses regulating her personal life, tracking her movements, and controlling her public image. Yet, for Virginia, the chance to step into Hollywood was worth the sacrifices. She signed, fully aware that her life would no longer be her own. That same year, she made her final vaudeville appearance on a radio show that would eventually evolve into The Ed Sullivan Show. Her performance, singing Tea for Two slightly off-key, failed to impress the audience at the time. Decades later, however, this footage resurfaced online, revealing more than just pitch imperfections. It showed her raw, unfinished energy, a glimpse of the woman before Hollywood refined and polished her. Even in failure, her charisma and determination were evident, a testament to the foundation built during years of struggle and relentless ambition. By 1941, Virginia Mayo had finally arrived in Hollywood, the city of dreams that demanded perfection and punished imperfection. Warner Brothers signed her for They Died with Their Boots On, a film starring Errol Flynn, marking her first step into the world of cinema. To assess her potential, the studio arranged a 12-minute screen test, dressing her as a saloon girl in a revealing costume, a bikini by the standards of the era. Every movement, every glance, every nuance was scrutinized, captured on film for an industry obsessed with control and image. Yet, when the test was completed, none of it made the final cut. The footage was deemed unsuitable, locked away in the studio vaults, and forgotten for over 80 years. Hollywood, as always, was determined to craft a polished, marketable version of its stars. The raw, vibrant Virginia, full of spontaneity and natural charisma, did not fit the image the studio wanted to present to the world. For decades, it remained a hidden testament to the talent that existed before the glamour, before the studio system molded her into a product. In 2023, film historians painstakingly restored this long-lost footage. When screened privately in Los Angeles, it stunned everyone in the room. What emerged was not the refined, controlled star the public had come to know. Instead, It was a woman entirely in command of her presence, playful, confident, and unafraid to assert herself in front of the camera. The footage revealed her natural charm and magnetic energy, a side of Virginia that Hollywood had deliberately buried. In those 12 minutes, audiences witnessed not just a screen test, but a declaration of identity, a young woman who refused to be shaped entirely by the industry. Her first official film role came later that same year in $1 Million Baby. She played a hatch-check girl with just 2 lines, a minor role by any measure, yet the studio's demands were relentless. Jack Warner ordered reshoots, insisting that she appear sexier, lighter, more controlled. Behind the scenes, producers tracked her every movement, measuring her weight and appearance meticulously. The obsession with image was unrelenting, a harsh reality for women in 1940s Hollywood. Virginia lost 15 pounds in 4 weeks, pushing herself to physical limits to comply with studio expectations, a testament to both her ambition and the cruelty of the system. Despite these pressures, Virginia retained her spirit. Even as the studio tried to shape her into a mold, glimpses of her true self, audacious, playful, and determined, persisted. The screen test, once buried and forgotten, became a symbol of what she could be, unpolished yet captivating. It foreshadowed the resilience and charm that would define her career, revealing a star who could survive, adapt, and ultimately shine, even under the most controlling of circumstances. Virginia Mayo's rise in Hollywood was never smooth. Even as she captured the attention of audiences, the pressures of the studio system weighed heavily on her. On the set of They Died with Their Boots On, she clashed with renowned costume designer Ole Kelly. A dress tore during a scene, causing a 3-hour delay. The studio whispered behind closed doors, labeling her difficult. In the tightly controlled environment of 1940s Hollywood, defiance could end a career. Yet, Virginia refused to compromise her integrity. She stood her ground, knowing that to survive in this world, talent alone would not be enough. She had to assert herself, even at great personal risk. The scrutiny extended beyond her performance. Studio memos, later published, reveal the relentless monitoring of her weight. Producers obsessed over inches lost rather than her talent or voice. Cast members whispered, and studio officials tracked every pound, every curve. It was cruel, but it was standard practice, a stark illustration of the environment women had to navigate in Hollywood. And yet, Virginia endured. She learned quickly that power came not only from charm and skill but from knowing when to fight and when to negotiate. By 1943, her career was taking shape, but not without danger. She joined the USO, performing for troops in Guam and the Pacific Theater. During one performance, an air raid erupted, shrapnel tearing through the night sky, scaffolding rattling violently above the stage. Despite the chaos, she continued to sing, her voice cutting through the fear and panic of soldiers hiding behind tents. The letters she wrote home, raw and emotional, were censored by the military for their intensity. Yet, decades later, she would read them aloud, her voice trembling as she recounted the boys crying behind the stage, witnessing horrors while she performed. It was a moment that defined her courage, a star willing to face danger to lift the spirits of others. Back in Hollywood, Virginia fought for financial recognition that few women could claim. Warner Brothers offered her $5,000 for The Kid from Brooklyn, but she insisted on a residuals clause tied to war bond tie-ins. The studio blinked, ultimately agreeing, granting her a $10,000 bonus clause that made her one of the most powerful actresses in the industry. She was no longer just a performer, she was a negotiator, a woman who understood the value of her presence and her work. Public perception began to shift as gossip columns highlighted the injustice of her treatment. People began rooting for Virginia, drawn to her talent, audacity, and resilience. She had become more than a starlet, she was a symbol of defiance, a woman navigating and reshaping a system designed to control her. Her charm, intelligence, and determination allowed her to survive the pressures of Hollywood while laying the groundwork for a career that would endure long past the fleeting whims of studio executives. Virginia Mayo's career in Hollywood was defined not just by her talent, but by the physical and emotional toll exacted by the demanding roles she embraced. On the set of The Princess and the Pirate in 1944, she engaged in a playful fencing rehearsal with a stuntman. One miscalculated swing sent the sword slicing across his arm, blood soaking his sleeve. The stuntman screamed, and the studio quietly paid $2,000 to settle the incident, hoping to bury it. The press, however, caught wind of the mishap, branding Virginia as unpredictable and dangerous. In a time when women in film were expected to be delicate, compliant, and flawless, this reputation was both unusual and powerful, hinting at a strength and fearlessness that audiences would soon come to admire. Her work in Technicolor films like Wonder Man pushed her endurance even further. The new color process required her fiery red hair to glow perfectly under searing lights, demanding long hours in stifling heat. Makeup artists dabbed, powdered, and reapplied layers as sweat and exhaustion threatened to undo their work. Virginia fainted on set, and doctors discovered she was suffering from anemia. The incident was quietly managed by the studio, as stars' health rarely took precedence over production demands. Yet, she endured, continuing to perform as if the strain mattered little, demonstrating the resilience that would become a hallmark of her career. In Captain Kidd, the challenges escalated. Her costume weighed 40 pounds, layered over a restrictive corset brace, forcing her to move with meticulous care. Every frame captured the physical toll on her body, but she bore it silently, knowing that her image and performance were the studio's ultimate priority. Photographs from the time reveal the strain etched across her face, a hidden testament to the sacrifices demanded of actresses in that era. Even in the moments when she seemed invincible on screen, Virginia drew upon the lessons of her vaudeville days and early performances, infusing her roles with authenticity and vitality. Characters like Marie Derry were transformed by her insight, blending vulnerability and strength, comedy and truth. When she protested unrealistic scenes, such as a prolonged kiss that defied the logic of real relationships, directors listened, recognizing the authority she carried over her own performance. Through every physically grueling shoot, every long day under hot lights, and every painful costume constraint, Virginia Mayo's commitment to her craft never wavered. The risks she took, both on and off camera, revealed a star who was willing to challenge conventions, endure hardship, and push the boundaries of what women in Hollywood could accomplish. Her dedication transformed her from a young performer into a legend whose courage and resilience became inseparable from her talent. Behind the glamour of Hollywood, Virginia Mayo's personal life was as tumultuous and complex as her on-screen roles. Somewhere in the mid-1940s, she became entwined with Howard Hughes, a man whose reputation for power, wealth, and eccentricity was matched only by his secrecy. Their relationship, shrouded in whispers and speculation, spanned several years. While the public assumed it was a fleeting fling, in reality, it was a significant chapter in Virginia's life. Hughes gifted her a diamond necklace, a symbol of their bond and his immense fortune. But when financial pressures struck her family, Virginia made the difficult decision to pawn the necklace for $8,000, a move that highlighted her willingness to sacrifice personal luxuries for the people she loved. Even as she navigated the treacherous waters of romance and rumor, Virginia maintained an unyielding commitment to her career. In 1947, she starred in The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, performing the elaborate rain scene dance number with Danny Kaye. The sequence demanded perfection over 50 takes. Her shoes soaked through, her skin blistered, her body exhausted, yet she pushed on. The physical toll was immense, and she ultimately contracted pneumonia, halting production for 2 weeks and costing the studio $20,000. These incidents were not isolated, they reflected the grueling expectations placed on leading actresses, particularly those in Technicolor films, where every movement, every expression, and every shimmer of costume had to appear flawless. Even as the studio system sought to control her public image, Virginia exercised a remarkable degree of agency. She made creative decisions, refusing to participate in scenes that felt inauthentic or overly staged. In doing so, she challenged the conventions of Hollywood, demonstrating that actresses could assert control over their work and influence the stories being told. Her choices often invited scrutiny, but they also earned admiration. Audiences sensed the authenticity behind her performances, a truth rooted in her early years of struggle, vaudeville, and sheer determination. Virginia's life, however, was never entirely private. Gossip columns dissected her relationships, her weight, and her every appearance, but she navigated the scrutiny with intelligence and resilience. She balanced the demands of stardom with personal sacrifice, never losing sight of her values even as Hollywood sought to mold her into a product. The juxtaposition of her private hardships and public triumphs created a figure both compelling and relatable, a woman whose charisma and talent were inseparable from her courage, integrity, and unbreakable spirit. Decades after Virginia Mayo first stepped onto a stage in St. Louis, the lost footage of her 1941 Warner Brothers screen test resurfaced, finally revealing the raw, unfiltered essence of the woman before Hollywood refined her. In 2024, the reel appeared at a Warner Archive auction, a silent scene capturing her improvising a flirtatious dance with extras. The footage, once blocked and hidden, sold for a record $45,000, a testament to both its rarity and its profound cultural significance. Audiences and collectors alike were captivated by the playfulness, confidence, and undeniable presence of a star who had existed beyond the constraints of the studio's polished image. Virginia Mayo's legacy is one of resilience, courage, and authenticity. She faced relentless pressure to conform to Hollywood's rigid standards, battled physical exhaustion, and endured public scrutiny, yet she never lost the spark that had defined her from the beginning. From her early performances in vaudeville and the aquacade to her daring stunts and demanding Technicolor shoots, she consistently risked comfort and safety for the sake of her craft. Her insistence on creative control, her fight for fair compensation, and her ability to navigate the treacherous world of fame all speak to a woman who refused to be molded entirely by others. Even when the studio tried to shape her image, Virginia's individuality shone through. Audiences sensed it, critics noted it, and decades later, historians marveled at the raw energy captured in long-lost footage. Her story reminds us that true artistry is often forged in struggle, in moments of risk, and in the refusal to surrender authenticity to external pressures. As we reflect on her career, it becomes clear that Virginia Mayo was more than a glamorous star. She was a trailblazer who redefined what it meant to be a woman in Hollywood. She endured hardship, challenged conventions, and left a legacy that continues to inspire. Those 12 minutes of screen test footage, once buried and forgotten, ultimately serve as a window into her soul, a playful, daring, and fearless spirit who danced to her own rhythm and, in doing so, changed the narrative of Hollywood forever.